Hi there, welcome back to Haunting Vales. Tonight's tale is steeped in shadows, where beauty and decay walk hand in hand. The secret of the withered rose begins with a single faded bloom, delicate, lifeless, and yet holding a secret that could shatter lives. What appears to be nothing more than a forgotten flower becomes a chilling clue in a puzzle woven with betrayal, obsession, and the silent whispers of the past. Hercule Poirot steps into this world of fragile petals and hidden daggers, determined to uncover what lies buried beneath the thorns. Stay with us until the very end, for in this mystery, even a single withered rose can conceal the darkest truth. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Haunting Vales, where every story blooms with suspense. Chapter 1. The Bloom That Never Fades. The rain had begun as a drizzle in the late afternoon, and was now a steady downpour that beat against the windows of Whitehaven Mansions. Hercule Poirot sat in his armchair, his legs neatly crossed, the tips of his patent leather shoes gleaming even in the dim light of the lamp at his side. Between his fingers he rolled a delicate porcelain cup, filled with the last of his tisane. The steam curled upward, vanishing into the heavy air of the room. At his writing desk, Miss Lemon made no acknowledgment of the storm outside. She was intent on her task, her pencil scratching across the page with her usual mechanical precision. Poirot glanced at her with quiet admiration. The orderliness of her mind, the lack of frivolity, it was a quality he found most refreshing. He cleared his throat gently, and she looked up with that small, questioning tilt of her head that meant only one thing: business. "Miss Lemon," Poirot said, his voice low and deliberate. "When one has lived long in London, one grows accustomed to a certain kind of weather. Gray, wet, indifferent. But do you not feel tonight that it is oppressive?" Miss Lemon adjusted her spectacles. "The damp does little good for the paper supply, Mr. Poirot. If it continues, I'll have to order new stock. Now, this came for you not 20 minutes ago." From the polished surface of her desk, she picked up a slim envelope and passed it across to him. Poirot took it with delicacy, running his finger along the edge before breaking the seal. The writing was unmistakably feminine, but the tremor in the strokes betrayed unease. He unfolded the sheet and read aloud in that calm, steady cadence Hastings always remarked upon. "Monsieur Poirot, I beg of you to come to me at once. There is a matter of life, of death, and of a rose that withers yet does not fade. I dare not speak more in writing. Come tonight, or it may be too late. Yours in desperation, Elinor Carlisle." Poirot let the paper rest in his lap. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he leaned back his chair, fingertips pressed together in his familiar manner. "Elinor Carlisle," he murmured. "The name, it stirs the memory. A woman once placed in great peril by suspicion, yet acquitted. Her family, her inheritance, her standing in society, all troubled waters. And now she calls upon me with the symbol of a rose that will not fade. Très curieux." The door burst open just then, and Captain Hastings came striding in, shaking rain from his coat. He looked every bit the soldier, upright and broad-shouldered, though the years had softened his edges. "Hello, Poirot. Beastly weather out there. I nearly lost my hat to the wind. Anything doing?" Poirot smiled faintly and handed him the letter. Hastings scanned it quickly, his eyebrows lifting. "Elinor Carlisle, eh? Dash queer business. Why bring you into it? A rose that won't wither. It sounds more like some sort of botanical joke than a matter of life and death." Poirot shook his head gently. "Non, mon ami. To dismiss a symbol because it is unusual is folly. It is precisely because it is unusual that we must attend to it. Order, symmetry, logic, these are the keys. And in this letter, all three are missing. That intrigues me." Miss Lemon closed her notebook with a decisive snap. "Shall I call you a cab?" Mr. Poirot? If you please, Poirot replied, rising to his feet. We go at once. A woman who writes such words as these does not exaggerate for sport. Come, Hastings, the adventure awaits. The rain greeted them in sheets as they stepped outside, the lamps along the street shimmering in the puddles. Hastings muttered something about pneumonia as he hailed the waiting cab, but Poirot was silent, his gaze fixed inward, already arranging facts in his mind like pieces upon a chessboard. They rode in silence through the foggy streets until the cab turned into a narrow lane of Georgian houses. The driver pulled up before a tall, austere townhouse where ivy clung stubbornly to the stone facade. Light glowed faintly in an upper window, but the lower floors were dark. A butler admitted them with a quiet nod, his lined face betraying no curiosity. Inside, the drawing room was cold despite the fire that smoldered low in the grate. Elinor Carlisle stood at the mantel, her figure still elegant though touched with weariness. Her eyes, large and luminous, carried the weight of long-kept secrets. But what caught Poirot's attention immediately was the object upon the table in the center of the room. It was a rose, or rather, what had once been a rose. Encased beneath a glass dome, its petals had curled and darkened, the bloom frozen in a strange twilight between life and dust. Time had stripped it of fragrance, yet it remained intact, its form unnaturally preserved. You see, Monsieur Poirot, Elinor said quietly, her hands clasped before her. It does not fade, not truly. Weeks have passed, and still it retains its shape, as though mocking the natural order. Hastings bent to peer at it. Looks to me like a dried flower. I dare say one could press it between the pages of a book and have it look much the same. Elinor's lips trembled into something between a smile and a grimace. If it were merely that, I would not trouble you. But this bloom was found in the hand of Sir Carmichael Clarke, hours after his death. And now it has come to me, left at my doorstep in silence, with only a note. The name stirred a flicker of recognition in Poirot's mind. Sir Carmichael Clarke, a man of reputation and wealth, whose philanthropic endeavors had made headlines a decade past. He had died in circumstances whispered about, but never fully examined. May I see this note? Poirot asked. Elinor handed him a folded slip of paper. He read the message aloud. The bloom that never fades shall reveal what you desire most to forget. Hastings gave a low whistle. Good Lord, Poirot. That sounds like blackmail if I've ever heard it. Poirot did not answer at once. He studied Elinor Carlisle with his keen gray eyes, noting the tightness of her posture, the way her gaze flickered toward the rose, and then away again as though the sight pained her. Madam, he said softly, tell me, who knows of this rose? No one, she whispered. At least no one who should. Carmichael tended his roses with devotion, but this bloom, it was unlike any other. He held it in his hand when they found him, as though it were the last thing he wished to see. Poirot bent close to the glass dome, his reflection mingling with the withered petals. Curious indeed. A rose, preserved yet withering. A message, cryptic and cruel. In your name, madam, entangled once more in whispers of death. It is not coincidence. Elinor's composure faltered. If this becomes known, if people believe I am again linked to scandal, my life will not withstand it. Poirot inclined his head gravely. You have my word, madam. Discretion shall be observed. But remember this, the truth, it is like the rose. However one tries to conceal it beneath glass, it endures. It does not vanish. It waits. As Hastings and Poirot took their leave, the storm outside had deepened into a fierce wind that rattled the cab windows. Hastings muttered about the oddity of it all, but Poirot only leaned back, his eyes half closed, his fingers drumming lightly upon the seat. Mon ami, he said at last, this rose, It is no flower of sentiment. It is a symbol, a cipher. Someone seeks to awaken the past, to disturb what has long been buried. Tonight we have seen only the first petal unfold. Soon enough, the entire bloom shall open. The cab rattled off into the fog, leaving the house behind in shadow. And upstairs in that silent drawing room, the withered rose gleamed faintly beneath its dome, a relic of beauty caught between life and death, an omen waiting for its hour. Chapter 2. The Petals of Suspicion. Morning broke gray and listless, as though London itself had not slept. Poirot, however, was already at his breakfast table, meticulously buttering a piece of toast. He lifted his boiled egg from its cup with great precision, tapping the shell with the edge of his spoon until it cracked evenly all the way round. The ritual pleased him. It gave a sense of order before he turned his mind to disorder. Across the table, Hastings unfolded his newspaper with a rustle that grated on Poirot's nerves. No mention of Elinor Carlisle in the papers, he remarked, half in relief, half in curiosity. I expected at least some whisper of it. A woman like that, her name still draws attention. Poirot dabbed his lips delicately with his napkin. Just so, mon ami. But gossip is like a weed. It grows only when watered. We must ensure no such watering occurs, at least not yet. A knock at the door interrupted their meal. Miss Lemon entered, brisk and efficient as ever. Inspector Japp to see you, Mr. Poirot. He says it's urgent. Poirot's brows rose slightly. Yup. Ah, it is most fortuitous. Show him in, Miss Lemon. The inspector entered with his customary energy, his coat smelling faintly of damp tobacco. His eyes twinkled with a blend of amusement and exasperation as he took a seat opposite Poirot. Well, my old friend, Japp began, seems trouble follows you about like a shadow. I've had a whisper of something last night, a report of you visiting Elinor Carlisle. Care to explain why Scotland Yard should not be twitching its ears? Hastings bristled. Really, Japp, Poirot only went at a request. Private matter, that's all. Poirot raised a calming hand. Do not bristle, Hastings. Our good inspector is merely doing his duty. As for Madame Carlisle, she fears scandal, and with reason. But what she has shown me is not merely a matter of sentiment. It is serious, Japp. Poirot described the rose beneath the glass dome, the note, the reference to Sir Carmichael Clarke. Japp listened, his expression tightening. Clarke, he muttered. Yes, I remember that one. Died at his estate near Market Basing, wasn't it? Officially heart failure, but there were murmurs. No case to be made, though. And now a dried flower turns up on Elinor Carlisle's doorstep? Sounds more like a poet's prank than a crime. Poirot leaned forward. Non-Japp. A prank does not carry the weight of the past in its petals. Someone seeks to unsettle Madame Carlisle, to force her into the open. The question is, why now? And why through the memory of Sir Carmichael? Japp sighed and rubbed his temples. If you're right, then it smells of blackmail. And if it's blackmail, sooner or later it's my business. Keep me in the loop, Poirot. Don't go running ahead without me. Poirot smiled politely. Always, mon cher Japp. Always. When the inspector had gone, Hastings turned to Poirot. Well, what do you make of it? Do you think Elinor Carlisle had anything to do with Sir Carmichael Clarke's death? You don't suppose? Poirot's gaze sharpened. No, Hastings. I do not make suppositions. I make observations. And what I observe is a woman terrified of a past she cannot escape. But terror, mon ami, can be the truth, or it can be the mask for guilt. That afternoon, they set out for King's Paddock, the former estate of Sir Carmichael Clarke. The journey by train took them out of the city's restless heart into the quiet of the countryside, where fields lay muted under a gray sky. Hastings, restless as always on such journeys, tried to make conversation, but Poirot was lost in thought, his fingers steepled before him, his eyes half closed. At last, Hastings said, "You know, Poirot, you remind me of one of those fakirs who sit cross-legged and go into a trance. You haven't said a word since we left the station." Poirot opened his eyes and gave a small chuckle. "A trance? No, Hastings. I am arranging the facts. The rose, the message, the death of Sir Carmichael Clarke. They are like pieces of a puzzle box. Each must fit exactly, or the box will not open. King's Paddock was a fine old estate, though somewhat neglected now. The gates hung crooked, and weeds had begun to creep along the gravel drive. A caretaker met them at the entrance, a stooped man named Merryweather, who regarded them with suspicion until Poirot produced a letter of introduction. Inside the grounds, the once proud rose garden lay in ruin. Dead stalks jutted from the soil, leaves mottled with decay. Only one corner showed life, where a climbing rose still clung to a trellis, its last blossoms pale against the encroaching winter. Poirot lingered there, touching a fallen petal with great delicacy. "Monsieur Merryweather," he asked, "do you recall the roses of Sir Carmichael Clarke? Did he cherish one in particular?" The caretaker shrugged. "Roses were his pride, yes. Always out here trimming, tending. So they gave him peace of mind. But one in particular? No, unless you count the white rose. He'd say it reminded him of his late wife." Poirot made a small note in his pocketbook. Hastings, meanwhile, prowled about, muttering on the state of neglect. Dashed shame, letting a place like this go to ruin. A bit of care, a gardener with spirit, and it could be fine again. They toured the house, which had the melancholy air of rooms once lived in and now abandoned. Dust lay thick on the furniture. A portrait of Sir Carmichael hung in the study, a tall man with stern eyes, a mouth set in determination. In his painted hand he held. Hastings gave a start. "Look, Poirot, a rose." Poirot stepped close. Yes, in the portrait, Sir Carmichael held a bloom, white, delicate, almost ghostly against his dark suit. The artist had painted it with reverence. "Curious," Poirot murmured. "Always the rose." As they departed, Merryweather mentioned another name. "If you want to know about Clarke, best speak to Mrs. Radnor. Housekeeper here for 30 years. Lives in market basing now, on a small pension. She knew more of him than anyone." Back in London, Poirot requested that Miss Lemon arrange an interview with Mrs. Radnor. While waiting, he received another visitor, unexpected yet familiar. Ariadne Oliver, the celebrated mystery novelist. "My dear M. Poirot," she exclaimed, sweeping into the room in a cloud of scarves and enthusiasm. "You're on a case again, aren't you? I can always tell. You've that look, like a cat who's heard the rustling of a mouse." Poirot inclined his head. "Madame Oliver, you are perceptive. But what brings you to me today?" "Oh, nothing important," she said, though her eyes twinkled with curiosity. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd drop in. But I can smell it. There's a story in the air. Something about roses, perhaps." Poirot gave a faint smile, but said nothing. Ariadne Oliver, though given to dramatic flights, often sensed more than she realized. That evening, Miss Lemon reported that Mrs. Radnor would receive them the following day. Poirot prepared carefully, laying out his gloves, his cane, his hat, as though each were a piece of a ritual. Hastings rolled his eyes, but said nothing. The next afternoon, they found Mrs. Radnor in a modest cottage on the edge of Market Basing. She was a stout woman with shrewd eyes, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. At the mention of Sir Carmichael Clarke, her lips tightened. "Good man, Sir Carmichael," she said. "Kind to his staff, though he had his moods. Loved his roses more than anything. Always said they'd outlive him. And in a way, I suppose they have." "Did he keep one in particular?" Poirot asked gently. Her eyes narrowed. "Yes, a white rose. He had a name for it, the bloom that never fades. Superstitious nonsense, I always thought. But he believed it. Said it was his symbol. When he died, well, They found one in his hand, didn't they? As though he clung to it, even at the last. Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings. The phrase matched the letter Elinor Carlisle had received. The bloom that never fades. And tell me, madam, Poirot asked softly, who else knew of this name, this rose of his? Mrs. Radnor hesitated. His brother knew. Dr. Bernard Clarke, and a few close friends, I suppose. But it wasn't widely spoken of. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. There were whispers, though, that Sir Carmichael feared someone, that he confided in his solicitor about certain papers. But I never knew the truth of it. He was a man with secrets, Mr. Poirot. That much I can tell you. When they left her cottage, the evening shadows were long, the sky darkening with the promise of rain. Hastings was thoughtful as they walked. So it's true, then. The rose had a name, a meaning, the bloom that never fades. And now someone uses it to haunt Elinor Carlisle. What on earth does it mean, Poirot? Poirot's eyes gleamed in the fading light. It means, Hastings, that we have only touched the outer petal. The heart of the rose lies hidden, and when we reach it, I fear we may discover a truth most deadly. They walked on in silence, the wind rising in the trees, and somewhere behind them, in the shadows of Market Basing, unseen eyes watched their progress with quiet intent. Chapter 3. The Thorn Beneath the Bloom. The following morning was one of those curious English days when the sky cannot decide its temperament. A pale sun wavered behind drifting clouds, offering brief moments of brilliance before retreating again into gloom. Poirot sat at his desk, turning the rose's glass dome gently beneath his fingertips, as though he were weighing its secrets. Hastings leaned against the mantel, impatient. I don't see how staring at a dried flower will get us anywhere, Poirot. We've spoken to Mrs. Radnor. We know Sir Carmichael valued the rose, and we know Elinor Carlisle's being tormented by it. But who benefits? That's what we must ask. Poirot looked up, his eyes gleaming. Just so, mon ami. Always in the matter of crime, one asks, who benefits? The answer, it is the key, but often it lies hidden beneath appearances. He tapped the dome softly, like the thorn beneath the bloom. At that moment, Miss Lemon entered, a note in hand. This came by messenger not an hour ago, she announced. Addressed to you, Mr. Poirot. Poirot broke the seal. His brows drew together as he read. Then he passed it silently to Hastings. The note was brief. M. Poirot, seek not the bloom that never fades, lest you find the hand that placed it. The past is buried. Leave it so, or the thorns will pierce deeper than you imagine. There was no signature. Hastings gave a low whistle. Well, that's a warning if ever I saw one. What do you make of it, Poirot? Poirot smoothed the paper. It tells us two things, Hastings. First, that we approach too near the truth. Second, that the truth is dangerous. Therefore, it is precisely what we must pursue. Later that day, they received word that Dr. Bernard Clarke, Sir Carmichael's younger brother, would receive them at his residence in Harley Street. A well-known physician, Clarke was respected, but had never carried the public weight of his elder brother. When they arrived, Clarke greeted them with the calm assurance of a man accustomed to patients and their ailments. He was tall, stooped, with iron-gray hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. You wish to speak of my late brother, he said without preamble, once they were seated in his consulting room. Well, what is there to say? Carmichael was devoted to his roses, to his philanthropy, and to his wife while she lived. His death was sudden, but not shocking. His heart had troubled him for years. Poirot studied him closely. And yet, doctor, it is whispered that he feared something, that he confided in his solicitor about certain matters left unresolved. Clarke's expression tightened. Rumor only. My brother was not a man of fear. He carried burdens, yes. His fortune was considerable, and he took great care in arranging its disposition. If he feared anything, It was that it might be squandered after his death. And the rose? Poirot asked softly. The bloom that never fades. For the first time, Bernard Clarke's composure faltered. His eyes flicked away, and a shadow crossed his features. He was sentimental about it, yes. Called it his symbol. Said it would last where he could not. But I paid it little heed. A man in his position, one learns to humor such notions. Poirot inclined his head gravely. Merci, docteur. You have been most helpful. As they left, Hastings muttered, Dash it all, Poirot. Did you see his face when you mentioned the rose? He knows more than he's letting on. Indeed, Hastings. His reaction was not that of indifference. It was that of one who fears what memory the rose might awaken. 2 days later, they were invited to a gathering at Lady Dittisham's residence, a soiree of sorts, where half of London society seemed to have assembled. Elinor Carlisle was there, pale and strained, her eyes flicking nervously about the crowded room. Poirot moved among the guests with grace, noting the undercurrents of whispered gossip that flowed like unseen rivers beneath the chatter. It was there that he encountered Richard Abernethy, a distant cousin of the Clarke family and a man with the air of someone who had dabbled in many pursuits without excelling in any. He greeted Poirot warmly, though his eyes betrayed calculation. Poirot, Abernethy said, glass of port in hand. Strange business, Sir Carmichael's roses, isn't it? I always thought the man a touch morbid, holding on to symbols of decay. Still, it's put poor Elinor in a fright, hasn't it? Poirot regarded him keenly. You speak as though you know much of the matter, Monsieur Abernethy. Yet the rose, it was not a tale for every year. Abernethy laughed too quickly. Oh, gossip gets about, you know. One hears things. He excused himself a moment later, leaving Poirot with the distinct impression that he had said more than he intended. When the evening ended, Elinor approached Poirot in the vestibule, her voice low, urgent. Monsieur Poirot, I am watched. I feel it. Someone in that room tonight despises me. I saw it in their eyes. Will you help me? Will you find out who plays this cruel game with me? Poirot bowed slightly, his gaze soft yet unwavering. Madam, I shall find the truth. But you must prepare yourself. Truth is like the thorn. It may wound before it heals. The next morning brought a shock. Inspector Japp arrived at Poirot's flat with grave news. A body's been found, Poirot, down by the river. Strangled. No identification at first, but in his pocket this. He placed a crumpled slip of paper on the table. On it were scrawled the words, The bloom that never fades. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And the man, known to the yard, Japp replied grimly. Name of James Frobisher. A petty blackmailer. We've had our eye on him for years. Looks like someone decided to settle accounts. And now this Rose business is tied to his death. Hastings stared. Then it's not just a cruel prank. It's deadly serious. But what connects a blackmailer to Elinor Carlisle, to Sir Carmichael Clarke, to that wretched Rose? Poirot rose slowly, his face grave. That, Hastings, is the heart of the matter. The petals unfold one by one, and what lies at the center, it will astonish us all. But already I see the pattern. Yes, the thorn beneath the bloom begins to show itself. That evening, Poirot sat alone in his armchair, the rose beneath its glass dome before him. He studied it as though it might speak. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, and the city murmured in its sleep. Poirot's little gray cells danced, arranging the fragments. Sir Carmichael's devotion to the rose, Elinor's fear, Bernard Clarke's unease, Abernethy's careless tongue, Frobisher's death. The pattern emerged, faint yet undeniable. At last, Poirot whispered to himself, It is not the bloom that matters, but the hand that placed it. The thorn, it pierces not by chance. Non, it is guided by one who seeks to wound with precision. He sat very still, eyes closed, fingers steepled, as the storm gathered outside. And somewhere in the night, another step was being taken in the dance of death, a step that would lead them inexorably to revelation. Chapter 4. The Final Petal Falls. The drawing room at Lady Dittisham's residence was ablaze with lamplight that evening, though the hour was late. The storm outside had at last broken into a steady rain, the windows running with silver trails. Inside, a hush lay over the gathering of uneasy figures. Elinor Carlisle sat rigid in her chair, pale but determined. Richard Abernethy lounged at the edge of the sofa, eyes darting. Dr. Bernard Clarke stood near the fireplace, arms folded tightly across his chest. And Inspector Japp lingered in the shadows, watchful. Poirot, immaculate as ever, took his place before them all. The withered rose beneath its glass dome rested on the small table at his side, mute and fragile, yet commanding their gaze. "My friends," he began softly, "tonight the time has come for truth. We have been haunted by a rose, withered, preserved, unnatural in its longevity. A symbol, yes, but also a warning. At first glance, it seemed the sentimental fancy of Sir Carmichael Clarke. But in truth, it was the key to a crime long prepared." A murmur stirred among the group. Hastings shifted in his chair, his eyes keen on his old friend. Poirot raised a hand, and silence fell again. "I shall take you step by step," he continued. "For as in the case of Richard Abernethy's family, or of poor Amelia's Crail, or the tragedy of Sir Carmichael himself, appearances are ever misleading. And so we must look beneath the bloom to the thorn concealed." He turned slightly, regarding Elinor. "First, let's recall, Sir Carmichael Clarke prized this rose above all his collection. Why? Because it was a memento of his late wife, Lady Margaret. Preserved at their wedding anniversary, it symbolized love eternal. Yet the bloom became twisted into something darker. For when Sir Carmichael fell ill, and suspicion crept into his mind, he confided to his solicitor. He feared for his legacy. He feared betrayal within his own circle." Poirot's gaze moved to Bernard Clarke, whose face had grown rigid. "Doctor, your brother suspected you. Do not protest. I read it in your reaction when first I spoke of the rose. You see, Sir Carmichael had begun to suspect his medication was tampered with. And who but his own physician, his own brother, could so easily introduce the means?" Bernard Clarke's mouth opened, but no words came. His eyes glistened with fury. Or was it fear? Poirot pressed on. "Yes, Sir Carmichael died of the heart ailment. But it was hastened, subtly, by your hand, Bernard. Not for hatred, but for money. The inheritance. Your practice was respected, but your debts were deep. You knew your brother's wealth was vast. And so, with each dose, you ensured the inevitable came sooner. But what you did not reckon with was his rose." Poirot bent and tapped the glass dome. The sound was sharp in the silence. Sir Carmichael left this as a silent testimony. In his final days, he pressed the bloom into the care of Elinor Carlisle, with words half-veiled. "Guard it well, for it will speak when I cannot." And so, when the threats began, when poor Elinor was tormented by warnings, the rose became the focal point. It was not mere superstition. It was a beacon pointing back to you. Bernard Clarke's hands tightened on the mantle until the knuckles whitened. "Lies," he muttered. "Coincidence. You build castles of air, Poirot." "Non," Poirot said gently. "I build only from facts. The anonymous warning sent to me, your hand. The blackmailer, James Frobisher, who died with the note in his pocket. They're doing again. He had stumbled onto knowledge of your part in Sir Carmichael's decline and sought to profit. You silenced him. Yet in silencing, you betrayed yourself." The room held its breath. Rain pattered insistently against the glass. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "You see, Dr. Clarke, crime leaves always its pattern, as delicate as the petals of a flower. You thought to pluck each petal away, one by one, until none remained. But there is always the final petal, the truth, that falls despite all efforts. Bernard Clarke's composure broke. His shoulders sagged, his head bowed. A strangled sound escaped him, half sob, half growl. "I had no choice," he whispered. "Carmichael held everything. He left me nothing but debts, responsibilities. Do you know what it is, Poirot, to live always in another man's shadow? To be nothing, while he was admired, praised, beloved? The rose, yes, I hated it. That damned rose, his eternal symbol. I wanted it gone as much as I wanted him gone." Elinor gasped, pressing a hand to her lips. Richard Abernethy muttered something inaudible and turned away. Hastings shifted, appalled, and Japp stepped forward grimly. "That's enough, Clarke. You've said your piece. The rest will be heard at the yard." But Poirot was not finished. He lifted the rose from beneath its dome, holding it delicately in his fingers. Its petals, frail and ancient, trembled. Sir Carmichael sought immortality through this bloom, Poirot said softly. But he achieved it otherwise. For the truth cannot be hidden forever. Like the rose, it withers not, so long as one looks with clear eyes. And so, justice is done. He replaced the flower, and the glass dome fell back into place with a faint click. In the silence that followed, the only sound was the steady patter of rain. Poirot looked around the room, at faces shaken, solemn, and at Elinor's pale relief. "It is finished," he said simply. Later, as they walked home through the damp night, Hastings shook his head in wonder. "It's incredible, Poirot. All from a single withered rose. Who would have thought it?" Poirot smiled faintly, his mustaches twitching. "Ah, Hastings, but it is always so. The smallest clue, the tiniest symbol, contains the universe within. The withered rose, it told a tale. And to the trained eye, it spoke louder than any confession." They walked on, their figures vanishing into the mist, as London settled once more into uneasy slumber. And thus, the final petal had fallen. My friends, if this mystery of Hercule Poirot has intrigued you, if the withered rose has drawn you into its secrets, then do not let the trail end here. There are more enigmas, more shadows, more revelations waiting. Join us again for the next case, and until then, keep your little gray cells sharp